if you
Okay.
could share for 3 or 4 minutes in greater detail a little bit of what went on for you. And I think, all have a few questions that we're going to kind of think about as Chris is sharing. So yeah, please
Okay.
share with us. That's exactly.
Yeah. Great. So we set off with the objective of trying to use AI in a very naturalistic way, where it doesn't get in the way of our sensory observation, but it does help us extend our reach. So thinking like a Reggio Emilia teacher, we went on river walks and just let the kids kind of notice. In the beginning, with no particular lens, they would just sit and sketch, sometimes do macro photography. And then we would bring this material back in the classroom and digest it. And still at that point, no AI has entered. And then as they created inquiry from their sketches, we just kept a giant inquiry board going. So Post-it started to kind of populate this board. And then over a couple of these visits to waterfalls and a farm and to rivers, we started to form affinity groups of all the Post-its. And then all the Post-its became like overarching inquiries for each affinity group. And that's really where AI stepped in. And I did some work with new generation science standards, with Common Core, just to kind of help us highlight where would this anchor in our curriculum. This is a year we're also trying to become a certified school. So all of this is like important documentation. And then from there, those became their research projects. They kept splintering into smaller groups until students had a group for a farm, a group for the river, and a group for color and perception. And this is where AI started really getting fun for us, because every time we would read things and every time we would research and find new materials, AI started helping us connect things to those standards. Then, as the research papers progressed, AI became kind of our extension of what we could research. So one student found a particular wasp called a Polybia occidentalis. And then that wasp, you couldn't find material about that wasp in normal research methods. So we started using Google Scholar to pull in specific research to that particular species. And then that became her textbook. So, meshing together 5 to 10 articles, then that became her kind of Q&A to generate more content. And then as they kept researching, the AI didn't really provide the content so much, rather it would allow them to take giant swaths of their research and do kind of checking their notes and creating conversations with the research. So you constantly have a GPT or an agent running where if students have already read material, we would kind of use it to converse with to make sure they had extracted all that was there. And then as they tried to kind of blow up different sections of their research paper, this created a nice like flash research to go to while I conferred with them. We would throw it up on the projector and just say, oh, well, I wonder if there's more there in your research. And, what else could we look for there as well? So it constantly created this like reflective mirror for us. I was really trying to not let it take over any of their, no cognitive offloading. We tried to make sure they were still sorting, selecting, discerning what was important. But definitely it gave them access to a giant swath of academic literature that they wouldn't normally be able to research with. So there's other parts to it, but that's kind of like the quick 3-minute version of it. Um, I have uh, I've done a little bit of reflecting and writing on this, more what we did with second graders last year. And the second grade project is kind of similar, where it starts with a particular katydid that the students find at the lunch table that's crawling around on the director's coffee mug, and they all become very attracted to it. And of course, there's no text for katydids, but we are in Panama where things like Smithsonian Institute are doing heavy research here. And so again, we were able to find specific research on Google Scholar about that katydid, and then that created a live text for them, where every day a different group would come. Remember, this is second graders, so it's a lot more whole group. And every day a group would come with their big questions. And then the katydid became a persona. We gave it a voice, and the kids would actually be talking to the katydid, and the katydid would explain to them all of their sensory world. Um, And so, yeah, I mean, with the younger ones, you have to do a little bit explaining, like this is not a real entity. When we were warming up for it, one kid got really disappointed that we weren't really conversing with a polar bear, but this was just sort of an AI version of a polar bear. So in the kind of literacy part, you do have to kind of debunk that. Middle schoolers didn't really have any problem with that. I would say what they were most excited about was they were able to delve into things like one student took on for her research six different animal species across the animal kingdom and studied six different eyes. So the eye anatomy, and then the ranges of color they can see, and then how that's like a survival advantage. And so that's like a pretty broad thing. We're also a school that doesn't have a vast library. We're only 55 students, K through 8. So this gave us much more access to just content and material as well. But anyway, in the end of her research, she created this series of six infographics about each species across the animal kingdom, and drew these color codes of the spectrum they could see according to what chromats they had, and came up with this really detailed explanation of how different animal species see their world differently. Yeah. So I would say like what's explosive is that sort of your sensory world can now be investigated in a way with granular research that we would never even think about 2 years ago. Um,
Chris, this was great, and thanks for sharing. And this, we're going to be doing some more, but I just wanted to kind of give the group a little bit of an idea of where we're going with this. And so we're going to be opening up shortly a Zoom board, which is similar to a Jam board, where we're going to have a chance to share. But before we even get into the Zoom board, I'm just going to share some of the categories. But what are some specific teacher moves or educator moves that you noticed that Chris did during this project? Any that's my weird AI webcam. Sorry about that. Any great questions or burning questions that came up for you, and any real aha moments that you had? And then we're going to be kind of as well talking about just some of the guiding concepts. But I mean, I'm going to start just by asking you, Chris. How do you think other teachers that you've worked with would handle the relinquishing of control? And you don't have to answer right now, but it's just a question that I've got to, I don't know if anybody else has any other, questions or aha moments they had. But for me, that was a big one. There's a big piece of control and relinquishing that's, I think, tough here. Um, any other questions that came up or anything that was like an aha moment or something you noticed that Chris did that you were particularly, surprised with or thought was cool?
I think for me, the thing that was interesting and something I'd like to do more in my rural community that I teach in is utilize the community more often. Being in a rural community, there's a lot less hustle and bustle, so there's a lot more opportunities to go out and explore. We have a very good river system that runs through our community. So thank you for the idea, Chris. Much appreciated. um, and we also are surrounded by woods. And I ran out of time this year, but we had a major tick problem this year. So much so that our kids couldn't go outside for recess in the last month and a half of school. So that was like a huge frustrating thing for the kids. And I had thought to myself, boy, that would be a really cool research project as to why are the ticks so bad? Why are ticks bad? And things like that. But we just ran out of time. We didn't get there. But so that was my big takeaway is using the community around you to make your lessons more relevant.